Hilchos Mechira Perek Yutes, chapter 19. Aleph. Aser lamaycher limker lechavir karka betalton sheish be'asikin v'ish bedin ad sheidiu. It's forbidden to sell a person property or movable property concerning which there is a dispute or a judgment pending till he notifies the purchaser. Even if the seller is responsible for the property if it's taken away from him, the svar is that a person does not desire to pay money for an object and then be forced to enter into litigation concerning it because he's being sued by others. When a person sells landed property to a friend and claims of ownership are filed by others, after the purchaser acquires the property through one of the established modes of kinyanim, he could retract. There's no greater blemish than this because he didn't even make use of the purchase and he already has claims against it. Therefore, the transaction should be nullified and the seller should return the money and enter into litigation with the Maharin. If the purchaser made use of it whatsoever, even if he just threw down his property marker and joined in its own adjacent property, he may not retract. Instead, he has to enter into litigation with the claimants. If they are successful in taking it from him in court, he may seek settlement from the seller as the halachos with regards to from whom the property is taken away. Whenever a person sells karka, a servant, or other movable property, he is responsible for them. If a litigant takes the purchased article from the purchaser because of the seller, the purchaser may collect all the money he paid from the seller because the article was taken because of him. This, even if the purchaser does not explicitly make this tanai, but purchases the article without any qualification. Even if he buys the property by virtue of transfer with a legal document and the seller's responsibility is not mentioned in the document, he's still chayiv. The fact that his responsibility is not mentioned is considered a Torah sefer. When the purchased article was taken from the purchaser in the district court, for example, the purchased article was movable property and it was proven that it was obtained by theft or robbery, or landed property that was taken by robbery, or a creditor of the seller came and took it from the purchaser. If the taken away was dictated by the district court. If, however, goyim take the purchased article from the purchaser, whether through the king or through the secular court, the seller is not responsible for the article. Although the goy claims that the seller stole the article and robbed of it and brought witnesses to that effect, the seller is not responsible at all. Because it's ayinus, and seller is not liable for losses that are beyond his control. Hey, when a person sells property to a friend, the seller makes a tanai that he will reimburse the purchaser for any loss of his property due to the factors beyond his control. He is chayav to pay even if the goy comes and seizes by force property due to the seller. If however a stream that was watering the field dries up, the flow of a stream deviates and makes a portion of land into a pool, or an earthquake comes and destroys it, the seller is not chayiv. She'elu Ketzib and Einish in Matzahu will Allah Alev Amecher Dvarza Pella Beis Shehisna. Matters of this nature are both beyond one's control and infrequent, and would not have occurred to ourselves to think about such an abnormal matter and made such a Tanai. Tanai has any other factor beyond one's control that's abnormal is not included in this Tanai. The same halacha applies with regard to any condition that is made with regards to monetary matters. We analyze the kavanah of the person making the Tanai. We include within a scope only matters that are well known that we assume to have been taken with the Tanai because they would have been in the mind of the person making the Tanai at the time. There was a story concerning a person who hired sailors to transport sesame seeds to a certain place. He made a Tanai with them that they are responsible for any loss that occurs because of factors beyond their control until the sesame seeds reach the destination. And then the river on which they expected to transport the cargo ceased flowing. Chacham said this is an abnormal factor beyond their control, and they're not likely to transport these sesame seeds on an animal to that place. So when a person sells property to a friend and the seller says, I am not taking any responsibility, I feel the maker is not chayav anything, even if it becomes known with certainty that the property was stolen and taken from the purchaser. Is there a limit in needless to say, should a creditor of the seller come and take the weary from the purchaser, the seller is not liable for any reimbursement. Why should kol t'nai shebemamin kayim? Any stipulation that is made with regards to financial matters is binding. That's Ruvain shemachar sold the shemish lebachrais. Reuben sold the field to Shimon without taking responsibility for it. But Levi made simiat Shimon, and Levi comes and takes it from Shimon. And Reuben lost his dinim Levi Asa. If he desires, Reuben sold the field to Shimon without taking responsibility for it, and Levi comes and takes it from Shimon based on a claim against Reuben. Reuben lost his dinim Levi Asa. If he desires, Reuben can enter into litigation with Levi. Levi cannot say, what business do you and I have together? For Reuben will tell him, I did not want Shimon to have any claims against me, for he has lost money on my account. Last Reuben sold the field to Shimon without taking responsibility, and then repurchased it from him, requiring Shimon to take responsibility. And now Reuben's creditor comes to take the field from him. Shimon, he cannot require Shimon to pay for it. Although he did not accept responsibility when he sold it to Shimon, he took responsibility with regards to himself, that he should not be the seller and then take the property himself. Reuben if, however, a creditor of Yaakov, the father, comes and takes the property from Reuben, Reuben may demand payment for the entire worth of the field from Shimon, for Shimon accepted responsibility for the field when he sold it back to Reuben, while Reuben did not accept any responsibility for others when he sold it to Shimon. Hilchos Mechira Perek Aleph. A person wanted to purchase an article from a friend. So the seller said, I'll sell it to you for 200 zuz, but the purchaser said, I'm only going to buy it for mana. And now they walked away from the deal. They each returned home. Afterwards, they came together, and again the purchaser took possession of the article by Mashiach. If it was the seller who made the proposition to the purchaser and gave him the article, he's required to give him only a mana. If, however, it was the purchaser who performed the Mashiach without making any further offers, that means he agrees to the 200 zuz and he has to pay that base. When a person purchases an article from one of 5 people, but he's not sure of the identity of the seller, and each of them say he's the seller, So the purchaser should place the money for an item amongst them and depart. The money should remain in custody until the false claimant admits that he is not theirs or the Mashiach comes. If he's a chassid, he should pay each one of them. When a person purchased an article from one of 5 people, did not pay at the time, did not take the article by making a false oath, and then repented and wanted to make restitution. If all 5 demanded payment from him, saying, I am the one from whom you denied taking the article, and whom you made a false oath, and he says, I do not know, he's obligated to pay to them because he committed the Aveda. The seller's word is accepted to say, I sold the article to this person and not to this person. When does this apply? When the article that he is selling is in his possession. If, however, the article is no longer in his possession, his statements are given no more than a credit of 1/8. The statements are given no more credit than those of one witness. And the Allah is applying to him with regards to the testimony are no different from those applying to other people. If a person The seller took money from 2 people. One gave him money against the seller's will, and the seller does not know the identity of the person from whom he took the money intentionally, and that of the person who gave the money against his will. There is no testimony at all. Each of the person takes an oath holding the chayfetz. Each of them receives half of the purchased article and half of the money. Hey, a person desires to take the property from a friend, the burden of proof. The When a person desires to take property from a friend, the general rule is the burden of proof is upon him. Now, for example, the purchaser claims you sold an article to me, and the seller claims I did not. The seller claims that he sold an article to the purchaser did not pay for it. The purchaser claims that he paid the money but did not perform Mashicha. The purchaser claims that he performed Mashicha without seeing a particular blemish, and the seller claimed that to have appraised him of it beforehand. Or one of them claimed that the transaction had been made conditional on a stipulation, the other denied it. You have to plaintiff does not prove his claim. The defendant who denies the claim must support his own claim with the Shua says. If he admits a portion of the claim or the plaintiff claims is supported by one witness, the defendant must take an oath as applied with regards to all other claims. A chenemini teves a dinner balabaya similarly nasat the chadam and mishlacht is lutechiso. When a person tells a storekeeper, give me a dinner's worth of produce, and the storekeeper gives it to him, and the produce is placed in the Rishus Harabim. If the storekeeper demands payment of the dinner, and the purchaser replies, I paid you the money, and you put it in your pocket, the purchaser is required to take an oath as the Chacham say. Afterwards, you may take the produce. The Svar is that produce has already left the domain of the seller and was placed in the Rishus Harabim. If the produce was in the domain of the purchasers, he would be required to take the Shus Esses, and then he would be freed of responsibility. If the produce was in the domain of the storekeeper would be required to take a Shus Esses, and the produce would remain his. If a purchaser gives a dinner to a storekeeper to keep produce, then that has been placed down in the Rishus Harabim. Now, again, if the purchaser gives a dinner to a storekeeper to take produce that has been placed down in the Rishus Harabim, if the storekeeper says the dinner that you gave me is a payment for produce that I previously gave you, and that you took for your home. I never sold you the produce that is now placed in the Rishus Harabim. The storekeeper may take a shvuah to support his claim while holding a Nekitas Chayfus. Produce is then returned to the storekeeper, for he never admitted selling it to the purchaser. If the produce was located in the store, all that would be required of him would be a shvuah sesses, as explained in the previous halacha. Test. The same halacha applies to the person who gives a dinner to a money changer. They take coins with much from my food in Rishus Harabim. Whether coins are piled up in Rishus Harabim, if the money changer admits to having sold the coins and he has not taken the dinner, the purchaser must support his claim by holding a Nekitas Chayfus. If the money changer admits to having sold the coins and he has not taken the dinner, the purchaser must support the claim by taking an oath while holding a Nekitas Chayfus. Then takes the coins. If, however, the money changer does not admit to having sold the coins to the purchaser, even though he missed taking a dinner for the purchaser at the time, for he claims that the dinner is payment for coins, the purchaser already took money, the money changer must support his claim by taking an oath while holding a Nekitas Chayfus. When a person exchanges a cow and a donkey, and the cow bears a calf, or one sells a maid servant and she gives him birth, the seller claims she gave birth before I sold her. The purchaser says she gave birth after I purchased her. The purchaser must bring proof to his claim to be granted. Even if the seller says, I do not know when she gave birth, indeed, even if the cow is located in a swamp or the maidservant in a corner or the public domain, they're considered to be in the possession of the seller until the purchaser can bring proof. If he cannot bring proof, the seller must take an oath while holding a Nekitas Chayfus to support his claim. The offspring with regards to the offspring of a maidservant, he is required only to take a shvuah sesses. I need there was person says, I don't know, so they divide it. One says the offspring was born in my domain, the other remains silent. The one who makes the claim is awarded the offspring. When a machlekes arises concerning a seller who owns two servants, one an adult and one of a minor, or two fields, one large and one small, the purchaser claims I purchased the greater one, while the seller claims you purchased the smaller one. So the burden of proof lies on the purchaser. If he does not substantiate his claim, the seller should take a shvuah sesses that it was smaller one that he sold, and he is allowed to keep the large one. Purchaser says, I purchased the greater one, and the seller remains silent. The purchaser is awarded the greater one. If the seller says, I do not know, the burden of proof lies on the purchaser. If he does not substantiate his claim, the seller should take a shvuah sesses that he does not know which article was purchased, and the purchaser is awarded only the smaller one. Whenever a doubt over responsibility for an article arises, the burden of proof lies on the person whose domain the doubt arises. A person exchanges a cow for a donkey, and the owner of the donkey performs Mashiach on a cow, but before the owner of the cow can perform the donkey dies. So the burden of proof is on the owner of the donkey to verify that the donkey was alive at the time the Mashiach was performed on the cow. Last, halacha machat hanim tzabavi besa cases when nikvaris in nekev mafulish in nimtzaleh keded dam yidush as a nitrafa kedem shchita. When someone sold an animal to a butcher before it's shechted, but the money had not yet changed hand, if it was shechted, and afterwards a needle was discovered in the animal's second stomach that had been pierced side to side, the figure higlit bi'amaka bidush as a nitrafa shlish yom kedem shchita. If a drop of blood is found upon it, it's clear that it became treifah before it was shechted. If a scab had formed over its wound, it is clear that it became a treifah 3 days before it shechted. If a scab had not been formed over the wound, there's a lack of clarity concerning the manner. The butcher must bring proof that the disqualifying factor arose before the purchase. The decision is rendered because the cow was in the possession of the doubt aroused. If he cannot bring a proof to this effect, he must pay the money due to the seller as explained above. Hilchos Mechira, chapter 21, Aleph. When a person transfers a non-specific entity to a friend, if the species being sold is known, even though its measures, its weight, and its numbers are not known, it's binding. If the species is not known, this transaction is not binding. How so? A person tells somebody, I'm selling you this heap of wheat for this and this amount. I'm selling you this cellar of wine for this and this amount. I'm selling you this bag of figs for this and this amount. Even though the measure of grain heap, the wheat of the figs, are the number of containers is it's binding. These principles apply even for the quantity, even if the quantity is greater or less than the estimation of the seller. The purchaser, the halachas we know apply, and the purchase price is compared to the market price as explained in Gimel. A person tells his friend, I will sell you whatever this house contains for this and this amount. Whatever his chest contains, or whatever his sack contains for this and this amount. For the rest of the king, there's no king. The purchaser does not make a binding commitment since he does not know what the contains. It's just like gambling. A person tells a friend that he's selling him wheat for 10 dinarim, but does not make a t'nai how many saw he's selling him, he must give him an amount of wheat equivalent to the market price at the time. And if he does not agree, then he wants to retract, then he's over mishapara. Hey, when a person sells property to a friend to build a house or a barn for cattle, when a person agrees to build a wedding home for a friend's son or a home for a widowed daughter, he should build him a home for this size. If he sells him property to build a large house, he should give him a space of 8 by 8. If he sells him a place of the reception hall, you should give him a space of 10 by 10. If he sells him a garden, it should be 10 by 10. A room, the height of the structure is half of its combined length of its width. Person sells a property to a friend for a family burial plot. Or if a person agrees to prepare a burial plot for a person, should build a crypt beneath the earth and prepare for 8 graves, 3 on one side, 3 on the other side, 2 opposite the entrance of the crypt. Measure the crypt should be 4 cubits by 6 cubits, and each grave should be 4 cubits long, 6 handbreadths. When a person sells a friend a place to his own field to make an irrigation ditch to water a parched field, he must give him a ditch 2 cubits wide with a cubit on each side of its banks. In the ceiling, if he sells him a place of irrigation ditch that is used for a pipe, he must give him a ditch that is a cubit in width and half a cubit on each side of its banks. The seller may plant trees on his land of the banks of the ditch, but he may not sow grain there. For grain weakens the land and damages the irrigation ditch. Should the land of the banks of the ditch become washed away, the purchaser may replace it by taking the earth in that field. We're talking about for Therefore, the seller's acceptance of the fact that an irrigation ditch will pass through this field is conditional to the stipulation. If a person sells a friend a path in his field, he sells him a path for one person, he must give him a path 2.5 cubits wide so the donkey and his burden can pass by. If he sells him a path that leads from one city to another, he must give him a path that is 8 amas wide. If he sells him a path for the Shusharam, he has to give him 16 cubits wide. The path of a king and the path of a grave has no limits. It appears to me that this is considered as one who sells an object whose species is not identified, in which instance the transaction is not binding. Based out of a kabim, a person sells a friend a place for relatives to stand and eulogize a person who has passed away. He must give him a place large enough to sow 4 kabim of grain. When a person tells a friend, "I'm selling you a cistern and its walls," he must give him a wall 3 handbreadths wide. When a person sells a field to a friend, and while defining the boundaries of the field, draws one boundary line long and another short, if the field of the boundary line that he drew longer belongs to only one person, the purchaser does not acquire any more land on that side of the field than of the side that he drew short. The fields of the side belong to the 2 individuals. The purchaser acquires the land as separated by a diagonal. If the field of the east and the west belong to Reuben and those on the north and the south belong to Shimon, when drawing the map, the seller must write the boundary of Reuben on 2 sides and the boundary of Shimon on 2 sides. If the seller drew 3 boundaries lines but did not draw the 4th, the purchaser acquires the entire field. With regard to the 4th boundary, however, he does not require. If the 4th boundary is included with the other boundaries and is not designated by a row of palm trees and is not large enough for 9 kabim of grain to be sown with it, the purchaser also acquires the 4th. No, it's not included with the other boundaries and it's not designated by a row of palm trees, or it's large enough 9 kabim of grain to be sown within it, the purchaser does not acquire the 4th boundary. Is the seller designates only the corners of the property without designating the entire boundary. Or he designates the 2 corners in the L shape. Or he designates certain portions to each direction. The purchaser does not acquire the entire property. Instead, he acquires only the portion the seller transfers to him, the portion granted to him by the judges. If a person sells a friend a bias in a larger building, although he drew for the purchaser the external boundaries of the entire building, he only gets the house. Maybe the boundaries appear larger. Had he sold an entire building, he would have written in the deed of sale, "I did not refrain ownership of anything in the sale." Only when a person sells a field, a large valley, although he drew in the boundaries, a person tells a friend, "I'm selling you fields," means 2. If he tells him all fields, even 3 or fields are acquired by the purchaser, with the exception of the gardens and orchards. Even if he tells him all the property, even if he owns everything he owns, even his servants, his buildings, you've been filmed. Person tells a friend, "I'm selling you one of my homes or one of my oxen." He's required only to give him the smallest ones. If one of the oxen dies or one of the homes collapse, So let me show the purchaser that they did not mikashiyad balashtar al tafina. Chaf ha'im lechaveri sada the bechia ani merch lechav. A person tells you, I'm selling you the field of the house of Chia. And he possesses 2 fields that he described in this manner. And he came ela pachas shabahem. The purchaser requires only the less of the one mechain kol gates. But chaf aleph. The person claims. The person says, Sada Reuven ani merch lechav. I'm selling you Reuven's field. Now, a purchaser's claim is favored in the following situation. A person tells his friend, I'm selling you Reuven's field. When the purchaser comes to make use of the field that is popularly known by that name, the seller tells him this is not the field that was owned by Reuven. It's only called that by people, but it never belonged to him. This is the field that belonged to Reuven. He says, pointing to another field, I purchased it from you, and this is the field that I sold to you. I'll make a video to bring it out. Seller must prove this claim. If he does not prove it, the purchaser acquires the field that is popular, known as belonging to Reuven. When a person tells a friend, I'm selling you half of a field, we should evaluate the worth of the entire field, and the seller should give him the purchaser entire worth, half the field of the entire field from it. When a person tells a friend, I am selling you the southern half of the field, we should evaluate the worth of the entire field, and the seller should give him the purchaser a portion of worth, half the field of the entire field from its southern half. If such agreement is commitment by the purchaser to make a place by a fence in this portion. So implicit is such an agreement is a commitment by the purchaser to make a place for a fence in this portion, including a small trench 3 tvachim wide behind the fence but close to it, and a larger trench 6 handbreadths wide out to the fence, and to leave the width of a handbreadth between the 2 trenches. All this is necessary to prevent a marten or the like from jumping on one of the fields. When a person owns half of a field, if he tells his friend, I'm selling you the half of the field that I own, I'm selling you the half of the field that I own, the purchaser requires the entire half. If he tells him, I'm selling you half the field that I own, the purchaser requires only a fourth. If he says, these are the boundaries of the field from which a portion is divided, separated, or pointed to you, if he tells him, these are the boundaries, the purchaser requires half. If he does not specify his boundaries, the purchaser requires merely a portion on which he could sow 9 kabin.